And to help us focus more on this story, we are joined from Rzeszów by Ms. Kamila Zaricka-Romanowska, a professor of EU Law and Security Studies. Ms. Romanowska, welcome to In Focus. While European leaders will hold an emergency video call with Trump and Zelensky ahead of the crucial Friday talks between Trump and Putin, do you think that Europeans are banking on Trump applying real pressure on Putin, or are they just preparing for a US position that diverges from theirs?
Well, to put it really short, Europe hopes Trump will use US leverage to obtain a veritable pause or a meaningful concession. But Brussels and key capitals are simultaneously running contingency plans for the realistic possibility that Washington outcome may divert from the EU line. So this is a prudent hedging, I would say. Why is this really sensible and why it's important? Because Trump's public language is about land swim and quick fill-out meeting, which increases the probability of headline bilateral outcomes that either are short-circuit multilateral verification or will be made to pressure Kiev to accept painful compromises. European unity is visible, clearly, but it's not perfect. 26 out of 27 leaders signed a statement insisting Ukraine must design its future, an explicit, preemptive attempt to shape the political envelope before Alaska. Hungary's non-association demonstrates fracture that Moscow and Washington both could exploit. The battlefield facts remain quite important as well, because we can see now a renewed Russian offensive in the eastern Ukraine, which is making a purely diplomatic freeze politically riskier. And a ceasefire could go freeze when it comes to the gains. And Europeans clearly plan to hedge by accelerating material pledges and proclaim clearing sanctional measures. But practical implications are big difficult, because in public diplomacy, when we have these 26 states of the EU, there are parallel discrete offer to Washington, like turnkey verification and sanction packages. But at the same time, acceleration of European operational measures, for instance, defense shipments, stockpile prepositioning, to show that Kiev retains leverage, any sort of leverage, in the situation where the talks falter. The rapid consistency shows that the immediate activation of a sanction and defense structure of US-Russia deal pays allied red lines, and it's really difficult in the difficult way stitched, I would say, when it comes to comparing and connecting dots and doing knots.
Well, what leverage do the European leaders have to persuade President Trump to adopt a tougher stance on Russia?
Substantial, but indirect. It's political, economic, and operational levers rather than coercive command, I would have to say. Because those key levers, which we can highlight as an economic and sanction application, for instance, EU can make US sanctions far tougher by coupling them with market and regulatory measures like banking restrictions, trade controls, 19 US sanction package plan, etc. That will increase the pain of Russia would suffer and making a falter US posture being effective. Another one is concrete capability offers, and that's NATO and EU delivery, because Europe itself can reduce US political risk of a confrontational line by promising and demonstrating, of course, follow-through procedures like pre-pledged air defense systems, logistics, intelligence sharing, and rapid reaction forces. And in this case, NATO visible posture and Mark's Rutte public framing that Alaska is a test of a brutal seriousness can help to create such a credibility. At the same time, we have intelligence and threat narrative. And it's really important as well, because sharing an allied intelligence that links Russia actions to wider hybrid threats like cyber threats, disinformation, asymmetrical one, and at the same time exposing Iranian drone transfers and PR support from Beijing, that can help reframe the conversation for US domestic audience, which is a broader strategic context and not merely a regional dispute. And this is something which clearly will show the citizens of the United States that their safety, their personal security, and their own business are at stake as well. we have to see here as well that the Europeans will clearly as well try to fight the target incentives. Because if necessary, Europe can offer some sort of transactional carrots, cooperation on energy, or trade openings, or even joint initiatives in other theaters, for instance, to help White House to sell firmness domestically. But limits are, and they are clear, because none of those tools are off to be switched. They are persuasive and apply US powers, but domestic US politics and President's personal preferences remain decisive. And unfortunately, those are not in the favor of Mr. Zelensky.
Ms. Romanovska, European leaders insist on Ukraine's full participation in any talks. Now, how important is this principle for the continent's long-term security architecture, and what happens if Ukraine's involvement and participation is being marginalized?
Well, to put it short, it's indispensable from the European and NATO perspective as well, because Ukraine's participation is legally and operationally fundamental. Excluding Kiev, or just excluding only in order to exclude Zelensky, would create a precedent that fatally undermines the post-Cold War rules-based order. I can understand that Mr. Trump personally doesn't like much President Zelensky. Maybe that's an idea to invite somebody else, because this will be really difficult from legal and operational and geopolitical details. For instance, from legal constraints, Ukraine consultation requires legislative approval and effectively a popular referendum to change borders. The president cannot unilaterally set the territory. Any external imposed territorial settlements would therefore be unconstitutional, and politically explosive in Kiev. And tension in the domestic issues are quite observed in there as well. Another one is operational necessity, because verification, reconstruction, and any security guarantees require the host states' cooperation. Peacekeeping, especially in the context of stability policy, which NATO beautifully developed, both the doctrine and practice, showcase that the access to bases or rebuilding program cannot be implemented without Kiev consent and participation. Moreover, the precedents and deterrence, accepting deals that alter borders without an affected state encourages revisionist powers, Russia and first as well, China as well, to test borders. Europe's defense posture and NATO position depends on upholding these principles that borders do not change by force, and that's important. Moreover, there are some practical policy measures to safeguard the principle as such. Because Europe's role is to ensure that Ukraine's role itself is not negotiable process precondition on the public record. Any bilateral US-Russia contact can only set procedural or exploratory aims, not decisions. So,
well, if Trump were to align more closely with Moscow's vision, which is still a very big possibility, how would that impact the US-European relations in the short term?
Well, the short answer to this question is that will acute strain with rapid operational consequences, possible, maybe not even longer-term strategic realignment if the divergence persists. Because if that will happen within the 3-6 months, we will see the immediate practical effects like trust erosion, which will invoke rapid public rebukes for this policy coordination and political shock across capitals. And the formal diplomatic fallout and increase of friction with the NATO Council, that's one. Another one is operational decoupling, because Europe accelerates defense industrial and procurement plans, greater EU defense autonomy and sovereignty in the context of defense. That forms coalition of the willing to sustain Ukraine and tightens bilateral security pact with Eastern members. The NATO summit decision, defense spending targets, which I talked about recently, already points towards greater European burdens. The sanction fragmentation are important as well, because the US and EU could diverge on sanction rollbacks or relief, producing legal and financial headaches for banks, corporations, and for whole global economy, which will obviously create very big uncertainty in global markets and quite a big shakeup. The longer terms, when it comes to the risk and adaptation, well, Europe may deepen strategic autonomy and sovereignty as well, due to more defense spending, new procurement chains, but it will be costly and tough. It will take time to substitute US military weight. On the other hand, a sustained US-Russia alignment could push NATO to reconfigure force posture in the Baltics and in Central Europe. And that's dangerous, that's expensive, and the competition in the near term will be really difficult. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult to assess, but unfortunately, it doesn't look promising.
Yes.
Neither for US, neither for EU.
Well, then, what role can shared NATO or transatlantic security interests play in aligning Trump with European pressure strategies? Or how can Trump persuade Putin to an immediate ceasefire as well without any territorial concessions?
Well, I think that first of all, we have to see the concrete roles and practical instruments which might be really decisive. If NATO converts politically well into administrative way, the visible package for White House with a connection to the European Union, this could really help out if that will be, for instance, Turkey package, which includes sanctions, verification, and capability. Because if NATO and EU will present a single cost package, for instance, immediate material timeline, a NATO technical verification mission, and a sanction ladder that the US can adopt and present as a win. This makes allied pressure actionable and political saleable as well. Moreover, we can see a verification and enforcement role that may offer credible NATO technical monitoring, like OSINT, on-the-ground team, satellite, verifiable triggers, etc. So any ceasefire is enforceable and not merely a headline. And Rutte and NATO leaders will have framed Alaska as a test of Putin's seriousness, of course, but NATO presence reduces the temptation of bilateral shortcuts. Moreover, counter asymmetric threats together as NATO, US, and EU will be very important because US, NATO, US hybrid and cyber centers do attribute attack quickly and expose disinformation campaigns and coordinate defensive assistance to critical infrastructure. And those joint military intelligence, in broader context, products, they will show linkage between Russia, Iran, and Chinese actions that will strengthen the argument that this is a shared systematic threat. Coalition of willing will be as well important because if there will be unanimity with a decision, Hungary, even if dissent, will have to at least stay neutral. And that will be really visible coalition that can act quickly and demonstrate operational resolve and then just barge into space for Moscow. And I think the last thing might be actually something very important to Trump as well. Just let's not forget that Mr. Obama has won a Nobel Prize. This might be actually this very important step for Mr. Trump to be considered in this competition as well.
Well, we'll see about that from Rzeszów. That was Ms. Kamila Zarikta-Romanovska, the Professor of European Union Law and Security Studies. Thank you very much for joining us.